From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Caitlin Lyons.
Congress returns to Washington with a long to-do list and a motion to vacate hanging over the head of the House Speaker. We'll be joined ahead by Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina.
A key question for him and his colleagues, the path forward for aid for Ukraine and other U.S. allies. We'll have more on the stakes around that debate with former ambassador to NATO, Bailey Hutchison.
And Arizona's Supreme Court rules a Civil War-era law criminalizing nearly all abortions can take effect, with potentially massive political consequences for a crucial swing state in the 2024 election. Kaylee, the timing of that ruling today, just a day after we heard from former President Donald Trump, his announcement on abortion, his policy is leave it up to the states.
Yep.
Tacitly almost endorsing what happened today in Arizona, and it's one we're going to hear a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an 1864 piece of legislation that the court has said can go into effect. And you're absolutely right. Donald Trump yesterday, while declining to endorse any kind of ban at the federal level, did say it should be up to the will of the people and the will of the states. And we've gotten a lot of reaction out of the state of Arizona, including one of its Democratic senators, Senator Kelly, earlier today. This was his response.
This law may have been written 160 years ago, but it's only being reinstated now because of politicians who work to overturn Roe v. Wade. In fact, in the Supreme Court ruling today, it mentioned the Dobbs decision 22 times.
We bring in now Bloomberg senior Washington editor Wendy Benjamin. Saying, Wendy, it's great to see you. The timing here is really remarkable with regard to the campaign trail. It's not only a day after Donald Trump made the announcement that I referenced already, but it comes after abortion has turned in the favor of Democrats time and again at the ballot with, just a little over a half year left. This could play in favor of Democrats in an important swing state again.
Absolutely. And ironically, it's an issue that President Joe Biden feels sort of uncomfortable with. The statement from their campaign came from Vice President Kamala Harris. And yet it is one of the things that could tip a close race over to him. And remember, he only carried Arizona by a few thousand votes, I believe. It was very, very close. But he carried it last time. And if they are successful in putting a ballot measure on the ballot in November in Arizona, codifying abortion rights, you will get massive Democratic turnout, and in a state that he carried barely before, and that could flip that very important swing state, even though it is ground zero for the immigration debate.
Well, and of course, the immigration debate is still raging in addition to the debate over reproductive rights. But on immigration, that, of course, was the real focus of the House impeachment of the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas that happened earlier this year. Those articles were set to go to the Senate tomorrow, and that has now been delayed. We heard from Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota on this entire effort on the Senate floor earlier today.
The House of Representatives has put forward serious charges along with evidence to support those charges. And it's not too much to ask that the Senate take this matter seriously and explore these charges before dismissing them. The Senate should have a full trial and take the time to examine whether Secretary Mayorkas' actions warrant a conviction. Then the Senate should be able to vote guilty or not guilty.
And Wendy, we did get a statement from a spokesperson for the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, that said to ensure the Senate has adequate time to perform its constitutional duty, the House will transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate next week. The thing about it, though, is delivering it next week rather than this week isn't going to change the ultimate outcome of this thing dying on arrival, right?
Absolutely. I'm afraid Senator Thune is in for a bit of a disappointment here. The chances of a Democratic-led Senate convicting a member of the president's cabinet for any of the things they've accused him of, which are basically carrying out the policies that he could carry out, whether you agree with those or not. It wasn't a high crime or misdemeanor, not really impeachable, and the Senate is going to dismiss those as quickly as possible.
Just considering the optics of Alejandro Mayorkas on Capitol Hill this week to make the case for Joe Biden's DHS budget while this is happening says a lot about where we are, never mind the sort of lack of direction we're still facing here when it comes to funding for Ukraine. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin talked about the need to help Ukraine in his testimony on the Hill this morning. Here's his take.
Putin is betting that the United States will falter and abandon our friends and leave Ukraine in mortal danger. If the Kremlin prevails in Ukraine, it would embolden would-be aggressors around the globe. The United States would be far less secure if Putin got his way in Ukraine. And President Biden has warned that Putin will not stop at Ukraine. If America walked away, we would put the free world in peril and risk unimaginable cost and dangers.
Lloyd Austin isn't the only one making the case. Mike Pompeo is also doing the same for Republicans in the House. Are we in a moment of fluidity here where this might actually happen? I know the line is it's going to be weeks, but I feel like we're getting closer to actual legislation than we've been in a while.
I think we might be. I mean, it will take weeks. It always takes weeks with Congress. But I do think there's becoming a few more increasingly isolated members who are dead set against Ukraine aid. I think that not only most of the Democrats, most or if not all of the Democrats, and a great number of Republicans believe in Ukraine aid because of the very things that Lloyd Austin was saying. It emboldens Putin. It emboldens China. It emboldens other countries to just go marching around taking what land they want. And that's not something that the U.S. can stand by and watch.
Yeah.
All right, Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson, thank you so much. Of course, as we focus on the issues surrounding one U.S. ally, we turn to another ally. As President Biden welcomes Japan's prime minister to the White House today as the two countries look to strengthen their ties while the tension of the planned takeover of U.S. Steel by Japanese Nippon Steel simmers in the background. Here's Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman late last year when that deal was announced.
I'm standing on the roof of my home right here in Braddock, Pennsylvania, right across the street from the Edgar Thompson plant. And I just have to say it's absolutely outrageous that they have sold themselves to a foreign nation and a company. Can't do that.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove is with us now. He has a new big take story out that is just published on the terminal and online. And the headline says it all, Josh. Japan's U.S. Steel takeover creates election year firestorm. The thing is, Japan is a U.S. ally. This is not an adversary, which just speaks to how unusual this whole thing is and the politics around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they just, it's not clear that they realized the mess that they were walking into with this bid. This story kind of sweeps together everything we've learned so far. The long and short of it, though, is I think some people might be prematurely thinking this thing is totally dead after Biden came out against it. This is a deal announced in December, $55 a share, quite a premium. So a lot of people were excited about it. But Senator Fetterman, followed by one of Biden's aides, Senator Casey as well from Pennsylvania, Senator Brown from Ohio, really came out against this. And that's because of the steel workers and the union jobs associated with them and the political clout of the steel workers. So the question has been, okay, well, what can change now? What will happen? Our reporting is that the problem facing this whole consideration right now is that every other option has problems. There's a reason U.S. Steel was doing a strategic review of itself. So there are some concerns as to if it remains independent, what the future will be both for the company and its union workers. Talk has turned to other companies that might buy it, but those have antitrust concerns that our sources have pointed to. And the auto sector, for one, has sort of warned against that, saying we don't want all the eggs of steel making in one basket domestically. So it's a good story. I hope everyone reads, everything we write, et cetera. But my colleague Joe Doe went to Pittsburgh, talked with both steel workers and just members of the community. It's hard to throw a stone in Pittsburgh and not hit someone whose grandfather or uncle or whoever worked for U.S. Steel or one of the many companies tied to it. And the focus there really is on jobs. And so what we're hearing is that there is a path for Nippon Steel here. The meetings so far with the union have not gone well. One that we recall had about 8 minutes of silence while they sat there reading an offer that they did not like, and it ended shortly after. This will all be in the background of this visit. But right now, the question for Nippon Steel is not, hey, Joe Biden is against this, you should pick up your toys and go home. It's more like all signs from opponents, some of whom have stepped back a bit off the ledge in their fervor against this deal, are that if the workers are on board, that's more important than the foreign ownership question, although other critics will tell you these are inextricably linked because foreign owners weaken bargaining powers, that kind of thing. So this deal is really swirling in the air. The invitation for Prime Minister Kishida came after the furor, whether erupted over all this. Whether it caused it is an open question right now. But I think
correlation, causation.
Right, exactly.
Well, so you've got both leaders in a room.
Yeah.
They're talking about strengthening our military alliance, U.S. investment in tech in Japan, the big announcement by Microsoft. Why isn't this on the agenda?
By design. They're talking about anything but steel. This is the elephant in the room, and they want to talk about the room. And so we'll see them talk about all that. They've got some announcements so far. Prime Minister Kishida later this week will speak to Congress, befitting sort of their status as an ally. They're rolling out the red carpet for him to tamp down some of the criticism. Interestingly, though, Kishida has really distanced himself from this controversy. If you read between the lines, one possibility is that he thinks Nippon Steel might have stepped in it a little bit, and he doesn't want any part of this mess. But needless to say, he's saying that this is a private company matter. Don't talk to me about it so much. So we're going to see the two leaders really downplay it. They'll almost surely get asked about it tomorrow. And so as traders are really watching this, right now it's at 25% below the offer price. So if you think this deal is going through, there's money to be made. But of course, this deal might not go through. No one knows what to think. They'll probably be asked about it tomorrow at the press conference. We'll be watching it closely. But our base expectation right now is that the CFIUS review will stretch past, for months, probably likely past the election. And that after that, we don't know. Another thing in our reporting is that there's some dispute over whether the U.S. government even can kill this deal if it wanted to. Joe Biden opposes it, but has stopped short of saying he wants to kill it.
All right, there's your primer for tomorrow. Josh Wingrove, many thanks for being with us on Balance of Power. Coming up, we'll be joined by Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The Speaker has a responsibility to bring the best possible packages to the floor in the interest of the country, in the interest of our allies. We have a responsibility to step up and vote on that. Farm bills always are bipartisan. NDAAs are always bipartisan. The appropriation bills in normal times are always bipartisan. We just have to let the body work its will. I have faith in the body.
Normal times. That was Republican Congressman Frank Lucas of Oklahoma on the early edition of Balance of Power today, speaking with Kaylee and I about Speaker Mike Johnson facing a motion to vacate and a very long to-do list. As members of the House return to town today, we're joined by one of them. Republican Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina is with us at the table. It's great to see you. Sir, thanks for coming back to join us at Bloomberg.
Nice to see you.
Boy, you've got a lot of work to do, and of course, as always, not a lot of time to do it. You're back for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The first order of business, we're told, is an extension of the FISA program. Can Republicans come together on a single bill to renew FISA?
I think we can. I think there's been some negotiations between judiciary and the intelligence community on trying to heal some of the differences. I think there'll still be some folks on either side that may not like it. But you know what? When you pass something, when you have both sides don't like it a little bit, maybe it's the right spot in the middle. We have to protect our country from those who are nefarious, that would do things to this country. But we also have an obligation for the Fourth Amendment to protect our nation's rights and citizens' rights.
Well, on the subject of protecting the country, proponents of Ukraine aid say that essentially by supporting Ukraine, you are also acting in the interest of the United States to make sure that American troops never have to go on the ground should Russia, if they can be victorious in Ukraine, move toward a NATO ally. And yet still very unclear what, if any, is the path forward for Ukraine aid in your body. What form do you expect it to take? What form would it need to be in to secure your vote?
Well, I think personally, and point blank, I think we need to support Ukraine. my opinion, Ukraine never needed to happen, and it was a result of what we did in Afghanistan. But here we are with the crisis, and it's where East meets West. You've seen now Russia and China agreeing and working, cooperating on unprecedented levels. And while we're fighting essentially a proxy war with Russia, we're also doing it with China. And now the axis of evil, as President Reagan said, are aligning very, very much. We have to show strong support for democracies, and we have to do that with Ukraine.
Is the Speaker going to get fired if he goes through with this? You don't need me to tell you about the motion to vacate. You've already lived through this experience. And some folks say, you know what, Republicans don't have the stomach to go through it again. It's not even a real threat, that the gentlewoman from Georgia is, in fact, just raising money on this. Do you think the Speaker's in peril?
I'm sorry, Joe. I do think it's a real threat. But sadly enough, when Matt Gaetz had his personal issue with Speaker McCarthy, he brought down a great part of what happened with the Republican Party. We don't need this nonsense. We don't need rogues. We don't need individuals screaming on the House floor that Republicans aren't doing enough. We need folks that actually think not just one step ahead, not two, but 3 and 4 steps ahead. What's the best way we can get most of Republican priorities put forth? You don't get everything 100% in this world. Some folks just need to realize that you can't get everything with one big bite. We don't have supermajorities in the House, Senate, and the White House. We need to do what we can when we can, and that time is right now.
Well, you allude to the former speaker, former member, frankly, Kevin McCarthy. There were 8 Republicans who joined Democrats in voting to oust him. Right now, the only real vocal Republican on this issue is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Congressman Lucas, who we just heard from, said he is only aware of that one. Do you think the votes would even be there if she moves forward with this?
Well, again, we're in a very slim majority right now. I think I forget the numbers are 2s right now. But also, I think Democrats are tired of this nonsense, too. I think the whole body...
So you expect them to step up to protect it?
Well, I don't know that would happen, but I think the whole body is tired of this nonsense. I'm tired of showboats in Congress that see this as their platform for personality. I think we're here elected by the people to do the work of the people. Yeah, we're going to have our disagreements. But you know what? I came here. I got 1 vote. They have 1 vote, too. It doesn't mean they need to take down the majority in doing so.
You can see how fed up you are.
Absolutely, to the teeth. And it takes a lot. I'm a surgeon. I have a patience that I've learned through the years. But now I'm just kind of...
Doesn't mean you're not keeping a steady hand. Kayleigh mentioned Ukraine.
Yeah.
Is this going to come to the floor attached to Israel and Taiwan, as we saw in the Senate, or is this a one-by-one approach? We spoke again with Congressman Lucas earlier. He said they should even put the Baltimore Bridge funding on this, put it all together and up for a vote. What do you think?
I don't know if that's a smart approach. I'm not the speaker, and I wouldn't dare speak for him. But I think putting things separately, we absolutely have to support Israel. Absolutely have to support Israel. They have the right to exist. Hamas butchered people that I know, that I met over just a year ago. They need to be absolutely eliminated. Whether we need to do this piecemeal, I think that's probably a more executable approach, but that's really up to the Speaker.
So you would, I would venture to guess, not be supportive of conditions being attached to further aid for Israel?
I don't. I have full faith in the Israeli government to root out evil. They have an absolute right to exist. And the fact that Hamas and Iran has said, no, we're going to absolutely, our goal is to dismiss their legitimacy. I think we need to give them all the arms and all the support that they need. Going back to Ukraine, 90% of the Ukraine aid we're talking about goes back to our own coffers, our own military. And folks need to realize this. If they have a fundamental issue with Ukraine itself, well, one, that's their opinion. But two, we need to reinforce our own supplies. My God, this is our nation's security that we're talking about.
You remind us that you're a surgeon, you're a medical doctor. We started our hour here with a conversation about this abortion ruling today in Arizona. There are very deep personal feelings, often tied to religious beliefs that have to do with this. How concerned are you that this is an anchor on Republicans when they try to keep the House in November?
Well, this was done when Roe v. Wade was overturned and sent back to the states, which is absolutely what should have happened. This was something that was in the Constitution as a state issue. This is certain states that are acting. I think our Democratic operatives are going to take advantage of this and push the emotions highly, if not the most emotional issue, as a nationwide issue. But, this is done in silos. This is done by one particular state. I think Arizona, what they did in the Supreme Court was something isolated. I don't see other folks doing this. But that's where it should be. It's in the states.
All right, Congressman Greg Murphy of North Carolina, thank you so much for joining us here in studio. Nice to see you, and welcome back to Washington.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, all eyes will be focused on tomorrow's all-important CPI print. We'll get a preview with Anna Wong of Bloomberg Economics next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
You should probably take the committee and the chair at face value. I think their best guess right now is still 3 cuts this year. And of course, the data can go one way or another, but that's the base case.
That was former St. Louis Fed President James Bullard, interviewed on Bloomberg Television earlier today as we await tomorrow's March CPI report. For a preview, we're joined now by Anna Wong, chief U.S. economist for us here at Bloomberg Economics. So, Anna, CPI is always important, but this one feels like it carries a lot of weight as we talk about whether the prior several months we have seen where inflation surprised to the upside were one-offs or two-offs maybe, or the establishment of a pattern.
Yeah, because typically in the first 2 months of the year, you see hot CPI reports. That's why the Fed can afford to discount those hotness. But when it comes to the March report, there's no more excuses. It got to show that it's coming down in order for the Fed's baseline of 3 rate cuts to be justified.
Mm-hmm. We spent a lot of time talking about the increase in energy prices, oil prices, gasoline prices for a lot of folks, which play politically here in our conversation on Balance of Power. What are we going to see tomorrow?
Yeah, so for the Fed, the most important thing is how is the gasoline price going to translate into CPI? And so the seasonal pattern of gasoline prices is that from March to July, the seasonal pattern would expect for them to increase by 6.5%. So only if gasoline prices are increasing more than 6.5%, will it show up as adding to inflation? So I think right now, with the, a lot of news highlighting the increase in gasoline prices, that might be a little bit of overstating the impact of gasoline on CPI prints going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, Anna, as we look ahead to the data we'll get tomorrow, we did get some data today, NFIB data, the survey of small businesses. Optimism among small businesses at the lowest in 11 years. Is that a sign of a crack that we have yet to see more widely?
Yeah, I think what it's suggesting is that small businesses are really struggling from higher labor costs, which they're increasingly unable to pass on to the consumers, because consumers are having cost fatigue also. So that's why their sales is plunging, profits is going down. And I think that's a demonstration of how the past Fed rate hikes have been biting, and monetary policy is still tight.
8:30 tomorrow. We'll be thinking of Anna Wong. Thanks, Anna, from Bloomberg Economics here on Balance of Power. Coming up, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Bailey Hutchison, will be joining us as we continue the conversation over Ukraine funding and America's approach to NATO. This is Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
I come here with no intention to lecture anybody or tell anybody what to do or get in the way of the process of politics and other things in the United States. I just come here as a great friend and believer in this country, and a believer that it's profoundly in your interest and your security and your future and the future of all your partners to release this money and let it through.
That was the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, at a news conference earlier this morning here in Washington, pushing the U.S. to free up aid for Ukraine. We're joined now by former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Bailey Hutchison, for more on this debate. Ambassador, thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Bloomberg Television and radio. Today, Congress returned to Washington. It is unclear what exactly the path forward is for Ukraine aid, what form it may take. How confident are you that this ultimately gets done in some form?
Haley, I believe it will get done. I think that Speaker Johnson is trying very hard put together the votes and to make this happen. I think he totally understands the importance of it to America. It is part of our security priority, and I think that Congress will come together and do the right thing, and it is about time.
Does it matter what form, Ambassador? We're hearing about a potential low interest or no interest loan. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the investment here in the U.S., and there are questions about, for instance, whether the Repo Act should be used to help fund the war effort in Ukraine. Do you care as long as the money gets there?
I don't think it matters if it is a low-interest loan, because in the end, we are going to have to help Ukraine rebuild. I think the Europeans will. I think, in fact, all of the NATO partners, we have 40 partners as well as our 32 in the alliance, and I think everyone will know that we are going to help Ukraine survive this tragedy that they have been experiencing. And so I think it doesn't matter how the money goes. I think the weapons need to get there, and I think it shouldn't be clouded by anything else. But however Congress needs to frame it, as long as they get the $60 billion in arms while they are fighting for themselves. They're not asking us to have troops on the ground, but they are saying we need arms to defend ourselves, and we should give them those arms.
Well, Ambassador, your words tonight echo what we heard from Jane Harman, the chair of the National Defense Strategy Commission, on this program yesterday when she was referring to the matter of U.S. troops and as well our NATO allies. Just take a listen to what she told us and we'll have you respond.
The Ukrainians either beat Russia in Ukraine or we fight Russia in Europe. It's not complicated. And when we fight in Europe as part of NATO, we have boots on the ground. We don't have boots on the ground in Ukraine. We're saving not just Ukrainian lives, but we're saving American freedom.
Essentially what she's alluding to, Ambassador, is this idea that if Russia prevails in Ukraine, that it could very easily move on to a NATO state. And it's worth pointing out, whether or not the U.S. aid ultimately comes for Ukraine, it's not guaranteed that Ukraine will win this war ultimately. How concerned would you be about Vladimir Putin wanting and acting on taking that next step in the future?
I think what Congresswoman Harman said is so true. This is a fight so we don't have boots on the ground in Europe again after World War I and World War II, because Putin has said, now this is something that I heard when I was at NATO, I heard it from our military as well as our allies, that Putin has told his people, we are going to recreate the Soviet Union. He has told his people that the worst in Russian history that happened was when Gorbachev said that the Soviet republics could become free if they so chose. And that is absolutely his goal, is to recreate the Soviet Union. So that means he will have to go into NATO countries, which means we have a commitment that is inviolate, that will draw us into a war with Russia. And I hope that my colleagues in Congress will see that this is in America's interest, that we help Ukraine with the arms they need to fight for their freedom, because they are doing the fight. We are not. We are helping them with arms. And that is what we should be doing right now, so that our troops will not have to suffer the losses that we have seen in the past.
Our military support of Israel is being questioned by many progressive Democrats at the moment. Ambassador, this is an administration that's consumed with the war in Gaza, and we're about to enter a new debate about funding on Capitol Hill. Secretary of State Antony Blinken talked about Israel's expected now incursion into Rafah earlier today after Benjamin Netanyahu said they had identified a date. Here he is.
With regard to Rafah, I don't want to prejudge any these ongoing talks. I can tell you that, again, we expect to have a continuation of those talks next week. I don't anticipate any actions being taken before those talks. And for that matter, I don't see anything imminent.
There are hopes for another round of ceasefire talks in Egypt. Ambassador, what should be the U.S.'s next move here?
I think the U.S. is walking a very fine line. We are supporting Israel, of course. They are our ally, and they are under siege right now, and they deserve our support. Also, with Iran threatening to retaliate against Israel, that is a fear for all of the Middle East. And I think it is important that Israel be able to defend themselves. And we are going to support Israel. And I think that wiping out Hamas, which is Iran, and don't make any mistake, Hamas is Iran. And for Iran to say, well, if you do anything that attacks our people, well, they have attacked Israel. And so I think it is very important that we support Israel in its effort to wipe out Hamas so that hopefully someday there can be a two-state settlement so that the Palestinian people have a homeland and so that Israel will be free from the fear of Iran through its proxies doing something as horrific as they did last October.
Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Bailey Hutchison, we thank you for being with us, Ambassador, on Balance of Power. Coming up, our political panel will be with us as we examine the fate of Speaker Mike Johnson. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Our teams between the White House and Speaker Johnson's teams, as well as with the other leaders in both the House and the Senate, have had ongoing discussions about how we get a bipartisan, a bill that is supported on a bipartisan basis, passed by 70 votes in the Senate. We believe it could be passed by an overwhelming bipartisan majority in the House, actually onto the floor and voted upon.
That was National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan earlier today urging Congress to pass additional aid for Ukraine. It's, of course, a sticking point for House Speaker Mike Johnson as a member of his own party escalates a threat to oust him over that issue. In a letter sent to Republicans today, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she will, quote, not tolerate Johnson's expected push to send more security assistance to Kyiv. For more, we bring in former Democratic Congressman Stephanie Murphy of Florida and Sarah Chamberlain, President and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Always great to see you both here in Washington. And Sarah, we know well that you have your pulse on the House Republicans. Is Ukraine aid going to pass? And if so, in what form?
It is going to pass. It's going to pass either this week or very early next week, without question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ukraine aid.
We haven't seen the text yet.
It's going to pass. The members are talking about it. They're having a meeting on it tonight. The members of the Republican Main Street Partnership want to get Ukraine
So what's
funded.
lit the fire if it's moving that quickly? We keep hearing that it's going to be weeks. There's going to be another recess.
No,
What's
the members
making this
really,
happen now?
They're hearing from home that they want it done. So what it looks like, it could be the repo. You know, a lot of people at home want, like, we have these Russian funds frozen. Why don't we use them? Like, why is it all as American funds? So you could end up seeing that in the bill. But they really want to get this moving and get this done, and they want to help Ukraine.
Well, of course, getting it done could have great consequence for Mike Johnson as a speaker, given the threat from Marjorie Taylor Greene. But there's much more buzz this time, Congresswoman, about how Democrats may step up to support him if what they're getting in return is Ukraine aid. Is that enough for Democrats to save a Republican speaker, or should they be asking for more here?
I think they should be asking for more because, quite honestly, they would be trading one vote for 8 months of governing. And we all know that we're in an election year, and whoever controls the House floor can put up bills that are uncomfortable and are hard for tough seats to take. And so they'd have to, I would hope, fight for a little more power sharing, maybe some seats on the Rules Committee, which has been a hard spot, a sticking spot for how bills get to the floor. Just a little bit more to see them through this 8 months till Election Day.
I want to hear from you about the speaker and what we just heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is that true? You know Mike Johnson better than most Americans ever will. Has there been an evolution here? Is that fair? Has he always supported some form of aid for Ukraine?
I think he's evolved.
Yeah.
Now that he's
okay.
a speaker, he's got a lot of responsibility, and his job is to keep majority.
So presumably he did have a conversation at one point with Marjorie Taylor Greene or other members suggesting that he did not want to see that money go.
He may have. I really don't have any inside information on that. But, you know, he now represents all of the members, and his job is to keep majority. And at Republican Main Street Partnership, we have 17 of the members that live in Biden districts. This helps them. And I think he would like to stay the speaker come next cycle.
And not moving forward on national security issues actually undercuts the broader Republican argument that they're strong on national security and Biden's weak. But if they're the ones that are holding up national security funding, it actually undercuts their own argument in the fall.
Well, but it's also worth noting on national security that it is not just funding for Ukraine that is wrapped up in this. It's Israel as well. And this is where we have a question not about Republican support, but around Democratic support, knowing that a lot of people are upset with what they see in Gaza. There is a conversation about conditioning aid for Israel on certain changes from the Netanyahu government. How many Democrats do you think could be lost if this is all packaged together who won't vote for this even if Ukraine is included?
I think you could look at some of the previous Israel votes, whether it was on condemning anti-Semitism or otherwise, and see the 20 or 40 who usually fall off. And that's probably what you're looking at here. But I think if this vote were to come to the floor, you would have enough Democrats and Republicans to do the right thing for national security and pass this package.
I wonder what Democrats might show up to help protect the speaker as well, Kaylee, which we've talked about more than once here. We've heard from one today, said the party would rally around Mike Johnson if a motion to vacate happened over aid for Ukraine. Let's listen.
If Speaker Johnson brings Ukraine aid to the floor and other aid packages to the floor and does the right thing, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene seeks to remove him or moves to remove him, I think that Democrats would join in a motion to kill such a maneuver because he should not be punished for doing the right thing.
Congressman Krishnamurthy is, of course, ranking member of the China Select Committee. Is that a good look for Mike Johnson? You let Democrats help to save you here? Would Democrats step up in numbers to make the difference?
It wouldn't have to be too many because for a motion to vacate, it's simply present and voting. So people who didn't vote, didn't show up for the vote.
This is more about not showing up.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a lot easier than going to the floor and saying somebody's name that doesn't belong to your party, which was what was proposed when it was Speaker McCarthy trying to secure the speakership.
You're going to host a party for Democrats that day? They can all come over to the townhouse?
No, but we had hoped that would happen with Kevin, that we'd have 3 or 4 of the Democrats that just would not show up. Obviously, that's not what happened, which is why we ended up with all the members at the townhouse. But no, I think this time, I think they probably have a little buyer's remorse, so I think that they save the speaker this time.
Well, and it's worth keeping in mind that Speaker Johnson's headaches do not just begin and end with aid for Ukraine. He's also struggled to get his conference together on other issues, including FISA. We're facing an upcoming deadline, April 19th. Around Section 702, specifically the warrantless surveillance program, there is a rift between those who would prefer maintaining the intelligence, the ability to get the U.S. the information it needs, even if Americans get caught up in the mix, and those who are worried about the data security, the privacy of Americans. Where is all of this going to land, Sarah? What are you hearing?
They are starting to negotiate that this evening. There's going to be something going on Capitol Hill where the 4 of them are going to be sitting down seeing if they can come up with a solution to this. We need to pass the FISA bill, and we need to do that soon. It goes to national security, and we've got to get it done. So they're hoping to get it compromised, and also they're hoping to get that to the floor in the next few days.
Yeah, that could be the first order of business, Congresswoman. You have a background in national security, of course. Should a warrant be required to collect data on Americans, even if they're talking to bad guys overseas?
I think that I know that there are enough Democrats and Republicans to reach the threshold. If you look at the NDAA, over 300 members united together to do what's right from a national security perspective. And I imagine that the same group of members will vote to pass the FISA bill as the details get worked out.
Yeah. Sarah, you're with us at the table, so I have to ask you about your decision to support a candidate running against Bob Good, the chair of the Freedom Caucus, a seat in Virginia that flipped in a primary, of course, to Bob Good. This is a very loud voice on Capitol Hill. It's one that we talk about a lot at this table, which is what compels me to ask you about it. What's your decision to run against an incumbent?
Well, we're actually not going to go against Bob Good. We are going to support John McGuire. We're joining Donald Trump in that. He's a great patriot. He's worked very hard on fentanyl. He's a Navy SEAL. So we're really not against Bob Good. We're really for John McGuire, and that's very important. And I know Bob Good has had his complaints, but Bob Good got there by primarying a sitting member. I mean, if you remember, he beat Denver in a...
Denver Riggleman.
Yeah, Denver Riggleman. So.
Interesting. So that exception is worthy in this case, obviously.
We don't do this often, but every once in a while we do it, and John McGuire is just a very compelling person that would be a great member of Congress. We've only ever done it once before, which was King. And we got Randy Feenstra, which is a wonderful pickup for us. So 99% of the money, though, is there to defend our members.
And it's worth reminding that Bob Good is one of the 8 Republicans who voted to oust House Speaker McCarthy.
That's right.
Just a few months ago.
Not that that had anything to do with your decision.
It did not.
Okay. Sarah stays with us, along with Congresswoman Murphy. Coming up, Arizona joining the list of states with near total abortion bans. We'll have a closer look at how this issue could impact the November elections next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Number of states that have initiatives on the ballot, and we haven't lost an initiative yet. We saw the surge in turnout. So yes, this is a very key strategic element of the 2024 elections.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Arizona's Supreme Court is allowing a near total abortion ban to take effect. This broke during the day today. Doctors previously could perform abortions up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. Now there will be a ban in almost all cases, the exception when the life of the mother is at risk. The decision has been put on hold for 2 weeks now, but would mean Arizona joins 14 other states that have enacted total abortion bans since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. Planned Parenthood's chief medical officer condemning the ruling, saying, quote, bans and criminalizing abortion do not reduce the very real need and demand for this essential health care, unquote. We reassemble our panel for their take on this. Stephanie Murphy and Sarah Chamberlain, thank you both for being with us. Congresswoman, Democrats see an advantage on the campaign trail again. That is what this issue has proven to be, going back to Roe first being overturned. How does Joe Biden, how do Democrats running for your former House of Representatives seize on this?
I think, it's going to help with enthusiasm. So in as much as some of the other foreign policy issues have sort of fractured the base, this is an issue that really pulls the base together. It will help with the enthusiasm for the Biden campaign or for voting for Democrats. But I would caution Democrats from over-indexing this, because libertarians who are just as likely to cast a vote for Trump also want access to health care. And you have to understand that what Arizona passed is from the mid-1800s, when Arizona wasn't even a state.
I know.
And speaking about states, the former president yesterday came out and said he thinks states should set the rules. So he has to answer as to whether or not he thinks the way Arizona state set the rule is appropriate. And moreover, we're going to have abortion on the ballot in Florida. So the former president is going to have to cast a vote himself as citizen Trump in the state of Florida on where he stands on abortion. So I think it's fair game to ask him exactly where he stands instead of letting him say, well, the state should decide.
Well, but his announcement on True Social yesterday, that video was supposed to be where he stood. His decision was, I don't support anything at the federal level, leave it with the states. Could the timing have been any worse for that announcement, knowing this court decision came down today, Sarah?
And I have no idea where this court decision came from. It is true, Arizona wasn't even a state. I mean, it's embarrassing, but it is a state's issue. I mean, and we kind of forget that at the federal level. Supreme Court said with Dobbs, this is a state issue. So put it back to the states. And I don't think they met Supreme Court and going back to a rule that was our great-grandmother's time. But at the same time, it is the state legislators that need to vote on this. And I always tell women, if you're unhappy, then make sure you vote in your state legislation races.
From your view, though, on Main Street, it's making your life more difficult. It's making your job harder, isn't it?
It is, but we talk about it as women's health care. You know, most of the members are at 15 weeks, and cases, rape, incest, health of the mother. They want to see women who are miscarrying get the medical treatment that they need. They don't want to see any of them, you know, having fluid dripping and all of this and not getting the care that they need, and maybe not being able to have additional children. So,
but this issue is really fracturing your base, because you have the evangelicals and then the folks that are in Main Street coalition that you run. You know, having what you laid out, some reasonable exceptions and whatnot, but that is not where the evangelicals are. I mean, if you look at Mike Pence, he came out immediately, and so you're seeing this fracture the Republican base.
All right, former Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy and Sarah Chamberlain of the Republican Main Street Partnership, thank you both so much, as always, for joining us here in Washington. And, of course, for more coverage, check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the Terminal and online.
It's a great panel. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. I'll meet you back here tomorrow on Bloomberg TV and Radio.